So LG just released the world's first 240Hz OLED ultra-wide monitor, and needless to say, 2023 is the year that OLED hits mainstream in monitors. The model I have here is the massive 45GR95QE, which is the counterpart to the 27-inch 27GR95QE, so whether you prefer the immersive 21:9 aspect ratio or the more traditional 16:9, there's an option for you to choose from. The amazing thing is that this monitor brings a whole slew of features such as VRR, AMD's FreeSync, Nvidia's G-Sync, a remote, and an incredible aesthetic with colorful LEDs. As a longtime LG fan, having used the LG C2 OLED for the last while, this will be my first OLED monitor, so thank you to LG for sending this out for review. Today I'll go over the unboxing, setup, features, PC gaming, and even console gaming. I'll also have everything in my setup, including this monitor, linked down below in the video description. And if you're new here, thanks for stopping by. On this channel I cover gaming, tech, and a few things in between, so if you enjoyed the video, be sure to leave a like or a subscription. If you don't, you're gonna have no milk next time you pour a bowl of cereal. Okay, so jumping right into the unboxing, we have the accessories package, which houses an HDMI 2.1 cable, a DisplayPort, a USB upstream cable, the power brick and lead, and this cute little remote, as well as a cable management clip. We also have the base and body of the stand, and of course the monitor itself. Setup is super easy and doesn't really require any tools. The first thing we do is assemble the stand, since it does come in two parts. Simply screw the stand base into the body. I will mention this monitor is VESA compatible. For this, you do just have to clip on the stand though into the back of the monitor, and away you go. There's also a quick release button here if you do need to take it off the stand. And I'm sure there's a couple ways to get this thing upright, but it's all terrifying regardless. In terms of ports, you have one DisplayPort 1.4, as well as two HDMI 2.1 ports, which is required to get high refresh through HDMI. You also have two USB-A ports and an upstream port to connect to peripherals and devices. For audio, you have an optical port if you do have a fancy setup or speakers, and a DTS-X supported headphone jack for spatial audio features. In terms of the build, design, and aesthetic, LG's absolutely done a great job embodying a premium gamer aesthetic. The stand itself is actually super solid, and especially since you have a monitor this wide, you kind of need it to be. It's actually metal, which I really appreciate, with minimal LG and Ultragear branding. In terms of adjustment, the stand offers a good amount of swivel, tilt, and height adjustments, and it's really solid while doing so. While there's no trunking in the stand for cable management, there is a clip included on the back end to keep your cables out of sight. Despite being absolutely massive, the panel itself is crazy thin thanks to the OLED display, and the overall design has a cool gamer aesthetic to it. Personally, I'm not into RGB or super gamer looking stuff, so thankfully from the front end it fits right into my setup, and I'm probably just going to set a static color for the lighting. For most people, you won't really see the back end too, but that doesn't stop LG from flexing with the LED strips. These you can change to just about any color or cycle through it in an RGB fashion. You may not see it that well during daytime or in a well-lit room, but it lights up my wall pretty well in a dark room. There's also down-firing lights here to illuminate a portion of your desk, which is a nice touch. Again, I'll probably just set this to a single color to match my PC. Quickly, back to the stand. This sits about 13 inches from the back of my desk, and it has a width of 22.5 inches. I personally sit a little closer than most people at my desk, and since my desk is shallow, I did have to throw this up on a monitor arm with the 75x75 VESA holes. And regardless of monitor, I'm always team monitor arm, so I did end up putting this up on a heavy duty arm to reclaim some desk space, plus I do love the way it looks in my setup. But jumping into the specs, we gotta mention the key feature here, and that this monitor is an OLED panel. This puts out a high 240Hz refresh rate, which is a 0.03 millisecond response time, which is practically instantaneous when it comes to gaming. The display itself is a 45-inch ultra-wide, which has an 800R curve, which helps keeps the massive screen in view, reducing head turning. That I'll get more into in a little bit. This monitor does also include AMD's FreeSync Premium and Nvidia G-Sync. It also has HDR10, as well as DCI P3 98.5% color gamut. There's a lot more specifics I'll get into as well, but I want to talk about gaming, since this is what you're probably here for. When it comes to gaming, this is truly one of the best monitors I've used, and really I'm stoked to have an OLED in my desk setup. I've used my LG C2 OLED for quite some time for console gaming, and like that, the panel here absolutely delivers. The first thing you notice when turning it on are the vibrant colors in absolute blacks. With the 1.5 million to 1 contrast ratio, the colors on here are absolutely wild, and it's practically an infinite range that pop on screen. I don't personally calibrate my displays either, but again, I'm not really the person that would do that anyways. I can say that out of the box, colors really do look great, especially for being an OLED. In terms of brightness, I also don't really have a way of measuring this. However, it does get up to 1000 nits brightness in HDR 3% APL, and in game there really is a noticeable difference. And here's the difference when HDR is on versus off. As well, in terms of resolution, at first I was a little bit worried about the 3440 by 1440 resolution, and I can say my worries were pretty much gone after playing a couple rounds in Overwatch. I also just started a playthrough of Witcher 3 for the first time, which I've never completed before, and I'm happy to get to experience it on here. I do mostly play story-based games on my LG C2 OLED on PS5 or Xbox, but when it comes to PC gaming, I like to play competitive Overwatch, and right now I'm grinding to Masters. Please wish me luck. And I'm hoping the 240Hz will help me get there, or not, since I'm actually trash at video games regardless, but with an ultra-wide display like this, I'm tempted to do another playthrough of Red Dead Redemption 2 as well, one of my all-time favorites. I do want to touch more on the 800 arc curve though, since I'm sure a lot of people may think it's a little bit too much. Having used this for the better side of a week now, I personally think when it comes to gaming, specifically gaming, you don't really want any less curved than 800R. I could say this beastly curved panel helps with immersion, but for my use case, it does that and actually makes this a viable option for competitive games, even if I'm still bad. Still, this is a 45-inch panel. If this were less curved, you'd likely have to start turning your neck to peek a minimap or another HUD element. Again, at first I was worried 800R would be a lot, but as someone who primarily uses my PC to game competitively, I can say this much curve is almost necessary for a display of this width. Not all is perfect though. I do want to talk about the pixel density, which is rather low at a PPI of 84. Depending on who you are and what you're accustomed to, this may be a little bit too low, but I will touch on this a little bit further down my review. I will say if you absolutely still want an OLED with a higher PPI, you could check out the 27-inch model, which has a PPI of 110.8. At this moment though, I'm sure most of us simply don't have an RTX 4090 laying around to push a higher resolution or PPI, so I do think it's a fair trade-off. The PC I'm using has an RTX 2070 still, and it's handled 3440 by 1440 without any issues whatsoever. And I can hear it already in the comments, you'll likely roast me for hooking up an ultra-wide to a game console, but look, hear me out. As someone who loves ultra-wide and still enjoys both PC and console, this still does an incredible job with gaming consoles, and no way should I not enjoy PlayStation 5 or Xbox on here. When hooking up my PlayStation 5, it still works for everything I need. Yes, the image is pillar boxed, but it still looks incredible. And by default, it is stretched, but in the settings, I can make this native resolution and boom, it's a 27-inch OLED. Not to mention all the same features like VRR, HDR, and the 0.03 millisecond response time work here too. I also have to mention that you absolutely cannot sleep on the picture-by-picture feature. Since I have both my PC and PlayStation 5 in the same setup, it's actually super useful being able to split two inputs on this monitor seamlessly. If you're okay with having the console letterboxed, you're still in for a good time. I'll see this being useful when I'm streaming from my PlayStation 5 or for others who have a separate dedicated streaming rig. In terms of glare and reflections, I will say in my office I get a ton of light from this window, so the anti-glare coating is actually pretty useful. I would have expected it to have a more oily look, but that's not the case here. And as much as I would want a glossy display for fidelity, the image for me would absolutely get annihilated by reflections from this window. But talking about the gaming specific features this monitor has, this is really what sets LG products apart from other brands, and that's their UI and settings. Off the bat in the menus you can see your current frame rate, if VRR is enabled, HDR, and LG's DAS mode, which is actually FreeSync and G-Sync. Apart from that, you can change your gaming picture modes, including your black levels. I previously thought they were super lame, but crosshairs are actually really useful in FPS games, especially with high recoil weapons. I personally use this a lot while playing Call of Duty, and if you do need it, there's an FPS overlay. Outside of gaming too, this monitor does work well with just about everything I've thrown at it. The only thing here to keep in mind is that the PPI is still rather low, again at 84, meaning text might not be as sharp as say a 34-inch display with the same resolution. Depending on what you're coming from or used to, this might be noticeable. I've previously used a 32-inch 1440p monitor with a similar PPI for quite a long time actually, so for myself it's not much of a deal breaker. I won't pretend a sharper PPI wouldn't be better, but then you run into the issue of needing a higher resolution, and frankly, not many of us are rocking an RTX 4090 like I mentioned, that pushes higher refresh rates on higher resolutions. For myself though, again, this isn't much of an issue since I find most value in the display size, which has been pretty useful when editing on massive timelines. While largely used for gaming, this monitor will still perform decently for productivity and creative work. I'll be totally transparent as well, I'm one of those weirdos that actually uses picture-by-picture. I like this for when I'm listening to music apps or YouTube on my PlayStation 5 while doing my night courses. I also want to give a specific mention to the 4-pole DTS headphone jack since this will actually see a lot of use for me. I recently got the Sony XM5s that I'll be plugging in directly into this port since I don't really like dealing with Bluetooth latency. This will be great for study sessions and work. Naturally with OLED panels, there's always worry regarding burn-in, especially with gaming HUDs. But luckily there are options here to prevent that from happening. There's a screen move feature that slightly moves pixels to avoid them from sitting still for lengthy periods, as well as a screensaver which puts the display to sleep if no changes on screen have happened for an extended period of time, as well as pixel cleaning and image cleaning to prevent burn-in in the long run. To navigate this monitor, there is a small button on the bottom to navigate with press and long press, but instead I do have to recommend this little remote which has everything else you need. Volume up and down for the DTS headphone jack, brightness up and down as well. You have the DTS sound profile as well as your input swap for sound. And lastly, there's 2 user-defined shortcuts, and I have mine set to hexagon lighting and picture by picture. Overall, the first line of 240Hz OLED monitors are beyond impressive coming from LG. Both this and the 27-inch model tick so many boxes when it comes to gaming. For me, I'm looking forward to finally finishing Witcher 3 and playing some more Overwatch. Hopefully I can try out the 27-inch model down the road as well, but let me know down below in the comments, what would you be using this for and what's your favorite feature? Be sure to check out my last video which covers my long-term review of the LG C2 OLED, and thanks again to LG for sending this monitor out my way. Anyways, that's been it. Thanks for watching. Till next time.